I salute the Buddha within you. You may not be aware of it. You may not have ever dreamed about it, that you are a Buddha, that nobody can be anything else, that Buddhahood is the very essential core of your being, that it is not something to happen in the future, that it has happened already. It is the very source you come from. It is the source and the goal too. It is from Buddhahood that we move, and it is to Buddhahood that we move. This one word, Buddhahood, contains all, the full circle of life, from Alpha to the Omega. But you are fast asleep. You don't know who you are. Not that you have to become a Buddha, but only that you have to recognize it, that you have to return to your own source, that you have to look within yourself. A confrontation with yourself will reveal your Buddhahood. The day one comes to see oneself, whole existence becomes enlightened. It is not that a person becomes enlightened. How a person can become enlightened? The very idea of being a person is part of unenlightened mind. It is not that I have become enlightened. The I has to be dropped before one can become enlightened. So how I can become enlightened? That is absurdity. The day I became enlightened, the whole existence became enlightened. Since that moment I have not seen anything else than Buddhas in many forms, with many names, with 1,001 problems, but Buddhas is still. So I salute the Buddha within you. I am immensely glad that so many Buddhas have gathered here. The very fact of your coming here to me is the beginning of the recognition. The respect in your heart for me, the love in your heart for me, is respect and love for your own Buddhahood. The trust in me is not trust in something extrinsic to you. The trust in me is self-trust. By trusting me, you will learn to trust yourself. By coming close to me, you will come close to yourself. Only a recognition has to be attained. The diamond is there, you have forgotten about it, or you have never remembered it from the very beginning. There is a very famous saying of immersion that man is a god in ruins. I agree and I disagree. The insight has some truth in it. Man is not as he should be. The insight is there, but a little upside down. Man is not God in ruins. Man is God in the making. Man is a budding Buddha. The bud is there. It can bloom any moment. Just a little effort, just a little help. And the help is not going to cause it. It is already there. Your effort is only going to reveal it to you. A help to unfold that is there hidden. It is a discovery. But the truth is already there. The truth is eternal. Listen to these sutras, because these are the most important sutras in the great Buddhist literature. Hence they are called the Heart Sutra. It is the very heart of Buddhist message. But I would like to begin from the very beginning. From this point, only Buddhism becomes relevant. Let it be there in your heart that you are a Buddha. I know it may look presumptuous. It may look very hypothetical. You cannot trust it totally. It is natural. I understand it. Let it be there but as a seed. Around that fact, many things will start happening. And only around that fact, you will be able to understand these sutras. They are immensely powerful. Very small, very condensed, seed-like. But with this soil, with this vision in the mind that you are a Buddha, that you are a budding Buddha, that you are potentially capable of becoming one, that nothing is lacking, all is ready, just things have to be put in the right order. That a little more awareness is needed, a little more consciousness is needed. The treasure is there. You have to bring a small lamp inside your house. Once the darkness disappears, you will no more be a beggar. You will be a Buddha. You will be a sovereign, an emperor. This whole kingdom is yours, and it is just for the asking. You have just to claim it, but you cannot claim if you believe that you are a beggar. You cannot claim it, you cannot even dream about claiming if you think that you are a beggar. This idea that you are a beggar, that you are ignorant, that you are a sinner, has been preached from so many pulpits down the ages that it has become a deep hypnosis in you. This hypnosis has to be broken. To break it, I start with, I salute the Buddha within you. To me, you are Buddhas. All your efforts to become enlightened are ridiculous. If you don't accept this basic fact, this has to become a tacit understanding that you are it. This is the right beginning. Otherwise you go astray. This is the right beginning. Start with this vision. And don't be worried that this may create some kind of ego that I am a Buddha. Don't be worried, because the whole process of the Heart Sutra will make it clear to you that the ego is the only thing that doesn't exist. The only thing that doesn't exist. Everything else is real. There have been teachers who say the world is illusory. and the soul is existential. The I is true and all else is illusory, Maya. Buddha says just the reverse. He says only the I is untrue and everything else is real. And I agree with Buddha more than the other Eastern points. Buddha's insight is very penetrating, the most penetrating. Nobody has ever penetrated into those realms, depths and heights of reality. But start with the idea, with this climate around you, with this vision. Let it be declared to your every cell of the body and every thought of your mind. Let it be declared to every nook and corner of your existence that I am a Buddha. And don't be worried about the I. We will take care of it. I and Buddhahood cannot exist together. Once the Buddhahood becomes revealed, the I disappears, just like darkness disappears when you bring a light in. Before entering into the sutras, a little framework, a little structure will be helpful to understand. The ancient Buddhist scriptures talk about 7 temples, just like Sufis talk about 7 valleys, and Hindus talk about 7 chakras. Buddhists talk about 7 temples. The first temple is the physical. The second temple is psychosomatic. The third temple is psychological. The fourth temple is psycho-spiritual. The fifth temple is spiritual. The sixth temple is spiritual-transcendental. And seventh temple, and the ultimate, the temple of temples, is the transcendental. These sutras belong to the 7th. These are declarations of someone who has entered the 7th temple, the transcendental, the absolute. That is the meaning of the Sanskrit word prajna paramita, the wisdom of the beyond, from the beyond, in the beyond. The wisdom that comes only when you have transcended all kinds of identifications, lower or higher, this worldly or that worldly. When you have transcended all kinds of identifications, when you are not identified at all, when there is only a pure flame of awareness left, with no smoke around it. That's why Buddhists worship this small book, very, very small book. And they have called it the Heart Sutra, the very heart of religion, the very core. The first physical can correspond to the Hindu map with the Muladhara chakra. The second psychosomatic with Swadhisthana chakra. The third psychological with Manipura. The fourth psycho-spiritual with Anahata. The fifth spiritual with Visuddha. The sixth spiritual transcendental with Agnya. And the seventh transcendental with Sahasrara. Sahasrara means 1,000 petaled lotus. That is the symbol of the ultimate flowering. Nothing has remained hidden. All has become unhidden, manifest. The 1,000-petaled lotus has opened. The whole sky is filled with its fragrance, its beauty, its benediction. In the modern world, a great work has started in search of the innermost core of human being. It will be good to understand how far modern efforts lead us. Pavlov, B.F. Skinner, and the other behaviorists, they go on circling around the physical, the Mooladhara. They think man is only the body. They get too much involved in the first temple. They get too much involved with the physical. They forget everything else. These people are trying to explain man only through the physical, the material. This attitude becomes a hindrance because they are not open. When you deny from the very beginning that there is nothing else than the body, then you deny the exploration itself. This becomes a prejudice. A communist, a Marxist, a behaviorist, an atheist, people who believe that man is only the body, their very belief closes doors for higher realities. They become blind. And the physical is there. The physical is the most apparent. It needs no proof. The physical body is there. You need not prove it. Because it need not to be proved, it becomes the only reality. That is nonsense. Then man loses all dignity. If there is nothing to grow in or to grow towards, there cannot be any dignity in life. Then man becomes a thing. Then you are not an opening. Then nothing more is going to happen to you. You are a body. You will eat and you will defecate and you will eat and you will make love and produce children, and this will go on, and one day you die. A mechanical repetition of the mundane, the trivial. How can there be any significance, any meaning, any poetry? How can there be any dance? Skinner has written a book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. It should be called Below Freedom and Dignity, not Beyond. It is below. It is the lowest standpoint about man, the ugliest. Nothing wrong about the body. Remember, I am not against the body. It is a beautiful temple. The ugliness enters when you think this is all. Man can be conceived as a ladder with 7 rungs, and you get identified with the first rung. Then you are not going anywhere, and the ladder is there, and the ladder bridges this world and the other. the ladder bridges matter with a God. The first rung is perfectly good if it is used in relationship to the whole ladder. If it functions as a first step, it is immensely beautiful. One should be thankful to the body. But if you start worshipping the first rung, and you forget the remaining 6, and you forget that the whole ladder exists, and you become closed, confined to the first rung, then it is no more a rung at all. Because a rung is a rung only when it leads to another rung. A rung is a rung only when it is part of a ladder. It is no more a rung. Then you are stuck with it. Hence, people who are materialistic are always stuck. They always feel something is missing. They don't feel they are going anywhere. They move in rounds, in circles, and they come again and again to the same point. They become tired and bored. They start contemplating how to commit suicide. And their whole effort in life is to find some sensations. So something new can happen. But what new can happen? All the things that we go on being occupied with are nothing but toys to play with. Think of these words of Frank Seed. The soul of man is crying for purpose or meaning. And the scientist says, here is a telephone. Or look, television. Exactly as one tries to distract a baby crying for its mother by offering it sugar sticks and making funny faces at it. The leaping stream of invention has served extraordinarily well to keep man occupied, to keep him from remembering that which is troubling him. All that the modern world has provided you with are nothing but sugar sticks, toys to play with. And you were crying for the mother. You were crying for love, and you were crying for consciousness, and you were crying for some significance in life. And they say, look, the telephone. Look, the television. Look, we have brought so many beautiful things for you. And you play around a little bit. Again you get fed up. Again you are bored. And again they go on searching for new toys to play with. This state of affairs is ridiculous. It is so absurd that it seems almost inconceivable how we go on living in it. We have got caught at the first rung. Remember that you are in the body, but you are not the body. Let that be a continuous awareness in you. You live in the body, and the body is a beautiful abode. Remember, I am not for a single moment hinting that you become antibody, that you start denying the body, as the so-called spiritualists have done down the ages. The materialists go on thinking that the body is all that is, and there are people who move to the opposite extreme, and they start saying that the body is illusory. The body is not. Destroy the body so the illusion is destroyed and you can become really real. This other extreme is a reaction. The materialist creates his own reaction in the spiritualist. But they are partners in the same business. They are not very different people. The body is beautiful. The body is real. The body has to be lived. The body has to be loved. The body is a great gift of God. Not for a single moment be against it. And not for a single moment think that you are only it. You are far bigger. Use the body as a jumping board. The second is psychosomatic. Swadhisthana. Freudian psychoanalysis functions there. It goes a little higher than Skinner and Pavlov. Freud enters into the mysteries of the psychological a little bit more. He is not just a behaviorist, but he never goes beyond dreams. He goes on analyzing the dreams. The dream exists as an illusion in you. It is indicative. It is symbolic. It has a message from the unconscious to be revealed to the conscious. But there is no point just to get caught into it. Use the dream, but don't become the dream. You are not the dream. And there is no need to make so much fuss about it as Freudians go on making. Their whole effort seems to be moving in the dimension of the dream world. Take note of it. Take a very, very clear standpoint about it. Understand its message. And there is no need really to go to anybody else for your dream analysis. If you cannot analyze your dream, nobody else can. Because your dream is your dream. And your dream is so personal that nobody else can dream the way you dream. Nobody has ever dreamt the way you dream. Nobody will ever dream the way you dream. Nobody can explain it to you. His interpretation will be his interpretation. Only you can look into it. And in fact, there is no need to analyze the dream. Look at the dream in its totality, with clarity, with alertness, and you will see the message. It is so loud. There is no need to go for psychoanalysis for 3, 4, 5, 7 years. A person who is dreaming in the night every day and in the days going to the psychoanalyst to be analyzed becomes by and by surrounded by dreamy stuff. Just as the first becomes too much obsessed with the Muladhara, physical, the second becomes too much obsessed with the sexual. Because the second, the realm of psychosomatic reality is sex. The second starts interpreting everything in terms of sex. Whatsoever you do, go to the Freudian and he will reduce it to the sex. Nothing higher exists for him. He lives in the mud. He does not believe in the lotus. You bring a lotus flower to him, he will look at it and reduce it to the mud. He will say, this is nothing. This is just dirty mud. Has it not come out of dirty mud? If it has come out of dirty mud, then it has to be dirty mud. Reduce everything to scars, and that is the real. Then every poetry is reduced to sex. Everything beautiful is reduced to sex and perversion and repression. Michelangelo is a great artist, then his art has to be reduced to some sexuality. And Freudians go to absurd lengths. They say Michelangelo or Goethe or Byron, all their great works of art, which bring great joy to millions of people, are nothing but repressed sex. Maybe Goethe was going to masturbate and was stopped. Millions of people are stopped from masturbation, but they don't become Goethes. It is absurd. But Freud is the master of the world of the toilet. He lives there. That is his temple. Art becomes pathology. Poetry becomes pathology. Everything becomes perversion. If Freudian analysis succeeds, then there will be no Kalidas, no Shakespeare, no Michelangelo, no Mozart, no Wagner. Because everybody will be normal. These are abnormal people. These people are psychologically ill according to Freud. The greatest are reduced to the lowest. Buddha is ill according to Freud. Because whatsoever things he is talking about are nothing but repressed sex. This approach reduces human greatness to ugliness. Beware of it. Buddha is not ill. In fact, Freud is ill. The silence of Buddha, the joy of Buddha, the celebration of Buddha, it is not ill. It is the full flowering of well-being. But to Freud, the normal person is one who has never sung a song, who has never danced, who has never celebrated, never prayed, never meditated, never done anything creative. Is just a normal. Goes to the office, comes to the home, eats, drinks, sleeps, and dies. Leaves not a trace behind of his creativity. Leaves not a single signature anywhere. This normal man seems to be very mediocre, dull and dead. There is a suspicion about Freud that because he could not create himself, he was an uncreative person. He is condemning creativity itself as pathology. There is every possibility that he is a mediocre person. It is his mediocreness which feels offended by all the great people of the world. The mediocre mind is trying to reduce all greatness. The mediocre mind cannot accept that there can be any greater being than him. That hurts. It is a revenge from the mediocre, this whole psychoanalysis and its interpretation of human life. Beware of it. It is better than the first. Yes, a little ahead than the first. But one has to go. And go on going, beyond and beyond. The third is psychological. Adler lives in the world of the psychological. The will to power. At least something. Very egoistic, but at least something. A little more opening than Freud. But the problem is, just like Freud reduces everything to sex, Adler goes on reducing everything to inferiority complex. People try to become great because they feel inferior. A person trying to become enlightened is a person who is feeling inferior. And a person trying to become enlightened is a person who is on the trip of power. This is utterly wrong. Because we have seen people, a Buddha, a Christ, a Krishna, who are so utterly surrendered that their trip cannot be called a power trip. And when Buddha blooms, he has no ideas of superiority. Not at all. He bows down to whole of existence. He has not that idea of holier than thou. Not at all. Everything is holy. Even the dust is divine. No, he is not thinking himself superior. And he was not striving to become superior. He was not feeling inferior at all. He was born a king. There was no question of inferiority. He was at the top from the very beginning. There was no question of inferiority. He was the richest man in his country, the most powerful man in his country. There was no more power to be attained, no more riches to be attained. He was one of the most beautiful men ever born on this earth. He had one of the most beautiful women as his beloved. All was available to him. But Adler would go on searching for some inferiority. Because he cannot believe that a man can have any other goal than the ego. It is better than Freud. A little higher. Ego is a little higher than sex. Not much higher, but a little higher. The fourth is psycho-spiritual, anahata, the heart center. Jung, Asagoli, and others penetrate that realm. They go higher than Pavlov, Freud, and Adler. They open more possibilities. They accept the world of the irrational, the unconscious. They don't confine themselves to reason. They are more reasonable people. they accept irreason too. The irrational is not denied, accepted. This is where modern psychology stops. The fourth rung. And the fourth rung is just in the middle of the whole ladder. 3 rungs on this side and 3 rungs on that side. Modern psychology is not yet a complete science. It is hanging in the middle. It is very shaky, not certain about anything. It is more hypothetical than experiential. It is still struggling to be. The fifth is spiritual. Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, the mass organized religions remain stuck with the fifth. They don't go beyond the spiritual. All the organized religions, the churches, remain there. The sixth is spiritual transcendental, yoga, and other methods. All over the world, down the ages, many methods have been developed which are less like a church organization, which are not dogmatic but are more experiential. You have to do something with your body and mind. You have to create a certain harmony within yourself so that you can ride on that harmony. You can ride on that cloud of harmony and go far away from your ordinary reality. Yoga can comprehend all that. That is the sixth. And the seventh is transcendental. Tantra, Tao, Zen. Buddha's attitude is of the seventh. Prajna Paramita. It means wisdom that is transcendental. Wisdom that comes to you only when all the bodies have been crossed and you have become just a pure awareness, just a witness, pure subjectivity. Unless man reaches to the transcendental, man will have to be provided with toys, sugar canes. He will have to be provided with false meanings. Just the other day I came across an American car advertisement. It says, with a beautiful car, on top of the car it says, something to believe in. Man had never fallen so low. Something to believe in. You believe in a car? Yes, people believe. People believe in their houses. People believe in their cars. People believe in their bank balances. If you look around, you will be surprised. God has disappeared, but belief has not disappeared. God is no more there. Now there is a Cadillac or a Lincoln. God has disappeared, but man has created new gods. Stalin, Mao. God has disappeared, and man has created new gods, movie stars. This is for the first time in the history of human consciousness that man has fallen so low. And even if sometimes you remember God, it is just an empty word. maybe when you are in pain, maybe when you are frustrated, then you use God as if God is aspirin. That's what the so-called religions have made you believe. They say take God 3 times a day and you won't feel any pain. God is not an aspirin. God is not a painkiller. So whenever you are in pain, you remember God. Few people remember God habitually. Few others remember God professionally. A priest, he remembers professionally. He has nothing to do with God. He is paid for it. He has become proficient. Few people habitually, few professionally. Nobody seems to remember God in deep love. Few people invoke His name when they are miserable. Nobody remembers Him when you are in joy, celebrating. And that is the right moment to remember. Because only when you are joyous, immensely joyous, you are close to God. When you are in misery, you are far away. When you are in misery, you are closed. When you are happy, you are open, flowing. You can hold God's hand. So either you remember habitually because you have been taught from the very childhood. It has become a kind of habit, like smoking. If you smoke, you don't enjoy much. If you don't smoke, you start feeling you are missing something. If you remember God every morning, every evening, nothing is attained, because the remembrance is not of the heart, just verbal, mental, mechanical. But if you don't remember, you start feeling something is missing. It has become a ritual. Beware of making God a ritual, and beware of becoming professional about it. I have heard a very famous story. The story is about one great yogi, very famous, who was promised by a king that if he can go in deep samadhi and remain under the earth for 1 year, the king will give him the best horse in the kingdom as a reward. The king knew that the yogi had a soft heart for horses. He was a great lover of horses. The yogi agreed. He was buried alive for a year. But in the course of the year, the kingdom was overthrown. And nobody remembered to dig up the yogi. About 10 years later, someone remembers what happened to the yogi. The king sent few people to find out. The yogi was dug up. He was still in his deep trance. A previously agreed mantra was whispered in his ears, and he was roused. And the first thing he said was, "Where is my horse?" After 10 years remaining silence underneath earth, but the mind has not changed at all. Where is my horse? Was this man really in trance, in samadhi? Was he thinking about God? He must have been thinking about the horse. But he was professionally proficient, skillful. He must have learned the technique, how to stop the breathing and how to go into a kind of death. But it was technical. Remaining 10 years in such a deep silence, the mind has not changed a little bit. It is exactly the same as if these 10 years have not passed by. If you technically remember God, if you professionally remember God, habitually, mechanically remember God, then nothing is going to happen. All is possible. But all possibilities go through the heart. Hence the name of this scripture, the Heart Sutra. Unless you do something with great love, with great involvement, with great commitment, with sincerity, with authenticity, with your total being, nothing is going to happen. For some people, religion is like an artificial limb. It has neither warmth nor life. And although it helps them to stumble along, it never becomes part of them. It must be strapped on each day. Remember, this has happened to millions of people on the earth. This can happen to you too. Don't create an artificial limb. Let real limbs grow in you. Only then your life will have a warmth. Only then your life will have joy. Not a false smile on the lips. Not a pseudo kind of happiness that you pretend. Not a mask, but in reality. Ordinarily, you go on wearing things. Somebody wears a beautiful smile. Somebody wears a very compassionate face. Somebody wears a very, very loving personality. But these are like clothes that you put on yourself. Deep down, you remain the same. These sutras can become a revolution. The first thing, the beginning, is always the question, who am I? And one has to go on asking. When first you ask, who am I? The Mooladhara will answer, you are a body. What nonsense. There is no need to ask, you know it already. Then the second will say, you are sexuality. Then the third will say, you are a power trip, an ego. And so on and so forth. Remember, you have to stop only when there is no answer coming, not before it. If some answer is coming that you are this, then know well, some center is providing you with an answer. When all the 6 centers have been crossed and all their answers cancelled, you go on asking, who am I? And no answer comes from anywhere. It is utter silence. Your question resounds in yourself, who am I? And there is silence. No answer arises from anywhere, from any corner. You are absolutely present, absolutely silent, and there is not even a vibration. Who am I? And only silence. Then a miracle happens. You cannot even formulate the question. Answers have become absurd, then finally the question also becomes absurd. First answers disappear, then the question also disappears, because they can live only together. They are like two sides of a coin. If one side has gone, the other cannot be retained. First answers disappear, then the question disappears. And with the disappearance of question and answer, you come to realize that is transcendental. You know, yet you cannot say. You know, yet you cannot be articulate about it. You know from your very being who you are, but it cannot be verbalized. It is live knowledge. It is not scriptural. It is not borrowed. It is not from others. It has arising in you. And with this arising, you are a Buddha. And then you start laughing, because you come to know that you have been a Buddha from the very beginning. Just you had never looked so deep. You were running around and around outside your being. You had never come home. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer was walking down a lonely street. Buried in thought, he accidentally bumped into another pedestrian. Angered by the jolt and the apparent unconcern of the philosopher, the pedestrian shouted, "Well, who do you think you are?" Still lost in thought, the philosopher said, "Who am I? How I wish I knew." Nobody knows. Knowing this, that I don't know who am I, the journey starts.